I rarely prepare remarks. I usually, as folks that are around me will tell you, I typically a couple days before run around and ask for a couple of slides and then just talk around them. But when you have spent as much time as our group has over the last several months focusing on what we are and what we're going to be today, and more importantly, what we're going to do tomorrow, it kind of sets a tone for preparing a little bit more for what it is that we're going to do. So this presentation today represents a lot of effort from the folks that I have a chance to work with on a daily basis. But more importantly, as Mark talked about, a lot of years with all of us in this room and people that preceded us in this room that have created a community that we have here in Garland today. And so with that, I'd like to deliver the Garland Address. And some of this is going to be about the Garland Chamber of Commerce. And when people ask me, how are things at the Chamber, I invariably answer that question, Garland is doing just fine, thank you. If you look at our vision, if you look at the purpose, as you will in just a few minutes, back to the beginnings of this organization, Garland Chamber and Garland are inseparable. We live for the same purpose, business success. So we'll talk about the Chamber, but more importantly, we're going to talk about the city in which we all reside and the focus of today in which we all do business successfully. The story of how your success creates ours. Again, inseparable. Your story is our story, is the collective story of Garland, Texas. That's what we're going to talk about today. And you know who's delivering it. Now, what you may not recognize is you wouldn't because you weren't here writing this, you weren't here preparing it, but the inspiration for this is we talked about what do we want to have you focus on today, and how would we help get that focus going? Well, Abraham Lincoln represents something that is important to the folks here at the Chamber in terms of his leadership in tough times, his integrity, his embodiment of servant leadership. And when you look at our mission, when you look at our purpose, when you look at the folks that in this room that represents the organization and represents the community, you come away with a strong feeling that they live, and we all live, to make the other person successful first. And that's kind of what Lincoln did. Catch up to my presentation. So we thought we would use Lincoln and the Gettysburg Address as a way to kind of put this in context. Now, the Gettysburg Address, which you all will remember, was delivered by Lincoln to commemorate a cemetery on a battleground during a very troubled time in our history. And what Lincoln did when he delivered this address was to refocus the attention from this horrible time that the country was going through back to its beginnings. And when you read it, 77 years ago, our fathers brought forth to this continent a new nation conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. November the 19th, 1863. That was Lincoln in 1863 talking to a troubled country, reminding them that this is why we were here. This is how we got started as a country. Conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. Well, now, how does that relate to us today? Thank you, Jenna. He wrote this address on the back of an envelope, which is reminiscent of how I usually prepare for these remarks, but I didn't today, so we remind everybody that this has a lot more preparation, so consequently it'll take a little bit longer. Not past 1 o'clock. Hopefully. If you remember the picture of Lincoln a couple of slides before, and you look at this one, not my high school graduation picture, but this picture, you'll notice that the one, really the only similarity is the eyes, or more specifically the bags under the eyes. I've studied this for a long period of time, and that was the only thing that I could come up with that I looked like Lincoln at all. The Garland Address. Now, if Lincoln were here today, and he was talking to you, what would he say? And maybe as important, what would he look like? Well, he wouldn't look like this. And he certainly wouldn't look like those pictures that you saw from the slideshow. He might look like this. He'd still have a hat. He'd still have a long coat. But it would be a little bit more updated. It would be a little bit more reminiscent of where we are today, and more specifically, where we've been in our history. And as today's Lincoln would deliver the Garland Address, it would sound a little bit like this. 16 years, that's 116 years for you liberal arts majors. Members of the Garland Commercial Club, 15 members of the Garland Commercial Club, brought forth a new community conceived in free enterprise and dedicated to the proposition that all business would find a place to succeed. Leadership in tough times. Kind of the theme of this. Your success, your story of success is our story, and how we coalesce around a community that throughout its history has dealt with tough times and done it very successfully. Got a track record, and while I was writing this, folks that are near and dear to me that I see on a daily basis said, "Paul, please don't drag folks through the day-by-day history of Garland, Texas." I said, "No, I won't do that, but I do want to talk about some significant occurrences." A few stories. You know, we're here in 1895 with the Garland Commercial Club, and not too long after that, we have a water supply, which is the focus of our downtown square. That fountain is the original water supply of Garland, Texas. We know this because when the Chamber tried to build its building on top of that, in about the 1970s, we found out that it was deed restriction because you can't put a building on top of the city water supply. So that's why we ended up on Garland Road. That's not the story I wanted to tell. The story I wanted to tell is when the city fellers, those 15 folks or folks like them, around that square said, "You know what? We got to move this water. And water is very critical to everybody right now. And we need it. We need to have a pump. And that pump is going to be driven by electricity. And we need to go downtown Dallas and negotiate with the power company at the time, which was in Dallas, to get a rate reasonable so that we didn't have to burden our customers with a whole lot of utility rates." So we went down there. Those 15 folks went down to the city of Dallas to get that rate, and weren't treated all that well. What I'm going to tell you next is going to be a litany of how this city has responded to adversity throughout its time on this planet. They weren't treated very well, so they came back, and what did they do? I'll tell you what they didn't do. They didn't lick their wounds. They didn't whimper. They passed the hat, raised the money, and went and bought turbines and started their own power company. Garland Power and Light, because we weren't going to be held hostage by anybody on the planet. So that was kind of how we got started responding to adversity. And when you look at some of the things, and I'll fast forward, as we move through our history, you know, the chambers of commerce in the world are very famous for declaring things. And we declared first that we were the cotton capital of the world when we raised cotton. We got the cotton gins downtown. And then when cotton kind of played out, we were the dairy capital of the world. As evidenced by our association with the dairy industry. And then we became the onion capital of the world. Don't ask me how we got that, but we were the onion capital of the world. But along about 1930s, 1940s, we started an industry. And the hat I'm wearing today is the carry-through of the first company we ever recruited. Byron Rolnick Hat Company out of Dallas, and we got them with free water. There's a water thing running through this. Bought them up from Dallas. Today, Stan, that's the company you all you all represent. And the hat I'm wearing is one of the brands, Stetson, that's made right here in Garland. It's reminiscent of how we, again, responded to adversity. Agriculture played out, we're now in manufacturing. We have a little shrine in our office dedicated to the memory of Walter Beach. And many of you know Walter, many of you don't. But Walter was a young banker in Garland about the time when our tank factory was playing out, and those jobs are going to go away. And that response to adversity was to fly to Chicago and recruit craft to come down here. And you're going to hear that repeated over and over again about bringing industry here. You're going to hear a theme about having a place where people could live affordably, grow up, raise families, be a good place to live, and also a good place to work, and the workforce component. Some of the other highlights of a track record that goes back to the 1800s. We became a city with industry. Those industry had employees. Those employees were living in houses, but what we didn't have was a hospital. So Austin Stanton, we had a little company called Vero, which today is called L3, Making Night Vision. Austin got a few folks together, raised some money, leveraged it with some federal dollars, and created Garland Memorial Hospital, which is today Baylor. Again, response to a community need. Wasn't going to sit there and let the lack of health care slow this community down. Well, the same thing could be said for major highway systems. And I'm not going to go too much into Highway 190 because that's the theme of December's luncheon. When you listen to Charles Matthews talk about the whole history of that road, and it's fascinating. People think that these things just happen. And when you think back about land that had to be acquired, and political maps that had to be drawn, routes that had to be conceived. But I will talk a little about DART. I got here in 1989, and I looked in the chamber offices then on Garland Road, and there was the remnants of a celebration. I said, well, what was this? And they said, well, we had a successful DART election. I said, really, what was that? I said, well, every 5 years at that time, you had to vote to stay in DART. And I went through a couple of those early on in my tenure here to help a community stay convinced that one of the things we needed was public transportation. It wasn't real popular. We got a lot of hate signs and people throwing stuff in our yard as a result of that. But hung in there, and we're standing in our city in an environment that's supported by the rail system and a multimodal transportation system that serves all of us and serves us well. And it'll become the spine of a redevelopment plan that we'll talk about just a little bit later. So the things that this community has needed, from moving us into owning our own power company through the different levels of economic cycles, to healthcare, to transportation, to a little bit more current. And again, this is the reason why I don't talk about chambers as a standalone. I talk about a community. When this community realized that retail was a priority, now that we had access, roads were coming in, people were here, process that got us Firewheel, the Bass Pro, the center right across the street. Huge public-private partnerships that those folks sitting at that table and like the folks that preceded somebody like the folks worked on for a very long time. And if I was prone to stay on this track, I would talk about these placeholders that came along at a time when they were viable, but when they went away, became viable for something else. In 1963, we had a little company called Marvin Motors that was established. Made about a truck a day. They were a boutique truck manufacturer. The Department of Energy and other folks that really needed highly, I think I'm supposed to stand over here. That was all that signaling back there. All quit moving around. Okay, I get it now. 63, Marvin Motors started, and a few years after that, a company by the name of Orwell Supply built a major facility, a headquarters facility. Well, when they went away, our response to that was to help facilitate a new company coming down that we really didn't know much about, SST Trucks. SST Truck came kind of in the middle of the night and occupied that facility that used to be Orwell Supply and took over Marvin Motors, and today they're making 150 trucks a day and trying to make 180 trucks a day. Kraft, remember Kraft? We recruited them to fill up our tank factory. Well, they bought a little company called Plastic Pack. which today is our largest electric user. Ingersoll Rand decided that they wanted to get rid of their mining division that they started their company with, Mr. Ingersoll and Mr. Rand, back in the 20s. They decided that wasn't the future, so they put all their mining divisions in Garland and said, we're going to have a fire sale. We're either going to close it down or sell it to somebody in India. And this little huge company from Sweden came over to have its capital. So again, the track record of responding to adversity, responding to the things that cause us to pause and regroup as a community. Okay, that was our track record. Where are we today? One of the things that we talk a lot about, and not only talk a lot about, but exercise, is relationships, partners. If you go back to the 20s and 30s and you research some of the logos, Chip, that we talked about when we were setting up our identity, you see a theme of working together works. In fact, one of the early logos was two handshake back in the day that talked about how we got things done. A community of working together. And that's kind of what we've always been, and more specifically what we are today. Our relationships. In '95, when we formalized the economic development relationship with the city, the school district, and the chamber, and very quickly the community college district and hospital, and now coming up this next year, our relationship with the small business development centers, and on and on and on, speak to our ability to address your needs through the leverage relationship with a whole lot of folks. So when we look you in the eye and tell you that we can help you facilitate making your business successful, remember that back to the Garland Address, all business succeed. Our confidence in that is a function primarily on the strength, the width, and the breadth of our relationships. And I say that is because that doesn't exist every place. The mayor goes to national conferences and talks about the Garland model. The chancellor of the Dallas County Community College District was here for receiving about $500,000 in grants last week. Talked about the relationship between the college and the community, specifically in that case, the chamber. So it's a huge point of where we are today in our partnerships. Education. I think everybody knows that. I mean, it was what I thought I was going to do with my life back there in Seguin, and that lasted 4 years till the nerves went. But you know intuitively, until you know it empirically, that education is the key to everything we're doing. I was looking at a site selector. This is really, really hot. I don't want to be all right. It looks really, really good, and I know that y'all are kind of envious, but it gets warm. And a site selector guide is a guy that does site selecting. He was doing a video presentation on the web, and he was talking about, don't talk to me about land, don't talk to me about incentives, don't talk to me about rail or access until you've talked to me about your workforce. Number one consideration in people coming and people staying is the quality of the workforce. And I'm looking in the eyes of manufacturers here, they're going, amen, amen. So in the whole thing that we talk about today, that we're very, very involved in, is preparing people to enter the workforce, preparing the people that are in the workforce to do things differently. Because Stan and Dan are sitting right here, I was watching a video about 2 weeks ago proving that you can teach old dogs new tricks. Not that they're old, not that they're dogs, but here's a company that's been making hats the same way for a while. And doing the process. And so I watched a video of a process that used to take, I think originally it was 4 days to do the hat bands. And when you hooked up with the T-Mac, that went down to like 4 minutes or something. The whole updating of the process. Well, the education is not just for the students coming up, it's for the folks that are in the workplace now, because to stay competitive, you've got to do it leaner, meaner, quicker, better, faster, all the time. And that's what we're all about. That's what our partners are all about. The training that those grants are going to provide is all about making the skills of our current workers better. So education is a lot about what we are. Mark took up a lot of time with that introduction. Not that it wasn't entertaining, and it was certainly a surprise. But let me hurry along. One of the taken for granted that we don't take for granted is business climate. You gotta have people there. They gotta be trained. They gotta be ready to go to work. They gotta be educatable to move up their skills. But they also have to live in a community where they're safe, where the roads are good, where you can flush your toilet and it works, where the business climate, the regulatory climate is business friendly, where you have access. And in today's world, where there is a plan for the future. That all exists right here. One of the things when we're recruiting, or even more important today, when we're holding on to business, we talk about the business climate. And Garland has a wonderful business climate, because why? We grew up together. We recruited those businesses together. Why in the world would we recruit them together and make it difficult for them to stay? It just doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make sense for how we do things. So the business climate is something that we work on every single day. You've heard taglines, the connecting source. In the conversations that we have,